And good morning, or actually, it's good afternoon right now. I've already lost some time here. Welcome to another conversation at the table. How are my friends in Los Fresnos doing this afternoon? Are you staying safe? Are you staying healthy? Are you staying in place? Staying at home? What's bothering you today? What's bothering you today? I hope you've had a chance to catch us on YouTube or Facebook or Vimeo. We had our services yesterday. Hopefully, you've had a chance to see those. This is your opportunity for input. If you've had a chance to see some of that, I'd like to know your input. So leave comments at the bottom of those pages. I'm interested in hearing from you. What worked yesterday? Was it YouTube? Was it Facebook? Was it Vimeo? Was it the web page? What worked? What didn't? What would you like to see? What would you like us to try? This is a work in progress, so we're small. We can try just about anything. I would like to hear from you. Your input is valuable. Do you have any prayer requests? Like I said, what's bothering you today? Or how are you dealing with stir crazy? How are you dealing with the kids? If you've got a prayer request, you can either leave it in the comments here. You can also, if you don't feel comfortable leaving it in the comments, then send the table a message through the chat box, or send me a message through Facebook Messenger, and we will pray for you. We've got a team that is praying throughout the week for all of us here at the table. So leave your prayer requests. We're interested in hearing from you. How are you doing? What's on your heart? What's on your mind? And again, I realize that in fact, I keep hearing from people that they're still working. They're still in the public. You're still in a public place every day. They're still in close quarters with people. And every day is, it's just a new reality. You come home and you have to, you have to change clothes, and you have to take showers, and you have to clean off. You got to do the deep cleanse. It's just part of the new reality every time we go out. So I know that can be stressful. It's a stressful time for a lot of people, maybe a stressful time for you. So again, feel free to leave us your prayer requests. This is Holy Week. Welcome to Holy Week, Passion Week. And again, 2020, Passion Week, Holy Week, different, completely different. So we're going to spend some time this week considering the events that led up to Christ's death and resurrection. And so we're experiencing Holy Week this year in a way that's in a different kind of context. I want to encourage you, read John 12 through 21 throughout this week, a chapter a day, and then there's more than a chapter a day. That's 10 chapters. But when you get to the weekend, double up on some of those chapters, but read a chapter a day and become familiar with what John is telling us about this last week of Jesus' life. And I encourage you, when you read John, again, chapter a day, disconnect. Use a paper Bible. And I like reading electronically these days, but use a paper Bible, disconnect from the internet, get away from the phone, get away from the internet, get away from the news, get away from the kids, and just let Jesus and John talk to you about the events and things that are happening in his life this week. And then share what you learn right here on Facebook. From John 12 to 21, those are 10 chapters in our English Bibles. Now, when John wrote it, he wasn't using chapters. They didn't have chapters back then. Chapters got invented so to help us navigate to where John is saying things, help us navigate our Bibles. But when we consider what John has written about this last week of Jesus' life, it takes up almost half of John. Almost half the chapters, almost half the pages that he uses that are in my Bible, half the ink that he spills writing John is about this last week. And almost all of it happens in that upper room that last night before his arrest and his trial and his crucifixion. So this is important to John, and it should be important to us. So because it's a big deal for John, it's going to be a big deal for us this week. I thought today, for a short devotional, we would look at John 13, and it's especially pertinent for us as we deal with the stir crazy, as we deal with the things that are happening, the fear and the new realities of not only just living in place, but then when we go out, having to deal with the constant concern for our health. In John 13, the disciples themselves are dealing with the surreal. It's already starting to set in. It's already gotten weird for them. The disciples don't know it, but they are in for a ride when we come to John 13. Jesus came riding into Jerusalem on a donkey. We talked about that yesterday. And he has spent some time in the past week then leading up to John 13. He spent some time, preaching and teaching in the temple. And we get from some of the other gospels, some pretty exciting and weird things are happening with that. But the whole thing is feeling surreal. He starts off this chapter, Jesus is washing their feet. He hasn't done that in front of a Passover before. What's going on? And Judas is acting a bit funky. He's acting a bit strange. What's going on with that guy? That doesn't make sense. So the disciples already are beginning to think something's just not quite right, and what's about to come is going to test them beyond their capacity. They're going to experience fear like they never felt. They're going to be stunned beyond comprehension. They're going to have this tunnel effect that you get when you're in trauma, and it's like this feeling of being in the tunnel, pinching themselves. Is this really real? When am I going to wake up from this dream? Is this really happening? And they have this strong sense of wanting life to rewind back before the raising of Lazarus, which was the original domino that started all of this. They're going to want life to go back to that because that seemed normal. And now nothing seems normal as they're in the upper room with Jesus and they're listening to him talk. And that's John 13 right here. They're going to want to know, why is this happening? Why can't we stop it? And in the midst of all of this, the reason Jesus has this long conversation with them that John has for us in John 13 is that Jesus is trying to prepare them for what's coming. Jesus wants them to remember his words when these things happen. And so he's wanting to help them navigate their reality. And part of their new reality is they're going to have an identity crisis. And so this is what Jesus says in John. When Judas had gone out, Jesus said, this is beginning with verse 31, "Now is the Son of Man glorified. God is glorified in him. And if God is glorified in him, God will glorify him in himself and glorify him at once. Little children, yet a little while I am with you. You will seek me. And just as I said to the Jews, so now also I'm saying to you, where I'm going, you cannot come. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I've loved you. You are also to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another." And what's happening around Jesus and the disciples is pure evil. That's why it feels so dark by the time they get to this. Pure evil. The greatest evil in history is about to go down. The world's darkest hour has begun. The creator of the universe is going to be killed on a cross. This is going to be the longest night ever. There's going to be treason and treachery and denial, betrayal, evil. Judas is an imposter. And Judas has already, by the time we get to this, he's already gone out of the room. He's off to play his role in the crucifixion. And Peter is hours away from betraying Jesus in Jesus' darkest moments. And he is going to 3 times deny that he even knows Jesus. In the most important hours of Peter's life, he's going to say, I don't even know the guy. So what is it that Peter and the other disciples need to know or need to hang on to in the midst of this new reality, this surreal tunnel that they feel like they're in? What is it that they're going to need to confront this evil that they see unfolding in front of them? Jesus says, a new commandment I give to you, love one another. The Son of Man is going to be glorified in these disciples as they love one another. That's how the Son of Man gets glorified. And if you're thinking like the disciples, you're thinking, what? That's it? In the midst of all the treason and the evil and the surreal moment that it feels like it's never going to end, this dark moment in history with all of the promises of the Old Testament hanging in the balance, a new commandment I give you is love one another. Come on, really? Love one another? That's earth-shattering? That's the mission? That's the world-conquering mission for the disciples? This is how you face evil? This is how you face the unknown? And if you don't think that this is how the disciples reacted, look what Peter in verse 35, he says, when Jesus says, by this will all men know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Next verse, Peter says to him, Lord, where are you going? It's as if Jesus didn't even say anything. He's like, he didn't even hang on to the love one another bit. He's hanging on to, where are you going? Peter's changing the subject. And John wants us to see, he wants his original audience to see that Peter's missing the point here. He doesn't want us to miss it. He doesn't want his church community to miss it. It really is earth-shattering and paradigm-breaking. It really does magnify Christ. It really does confront evil in the darkness. This is how the church does war with evil. This is the message of the contrast. The new commandment I give you, love one another. Just as I have loved you, you're to love one another. And by this, all people will know you're my disciples if you have love for one another. So while Christ is going to the cross, while Christ is undergoing all this evil on our behalf, his disciples are to remain witnesses on earth with one new commandment: love one another. And Christ doesn't say, he doesn't say, pick up your swords. And by the way, Peter's going to do that. He's not saying pick up your swords. Don't go trying to right all the wrongs. Don't go off running to the religious leaders, running to the Roman authorities about this great evil that's been perpetrated. Don't begin believing that the world's way of doing things is how you confront evil and how you confront the unknown. No. How you confront this is loving one another. Because the disciples cannot go where Jesus is going, they speak to the world, they speak to the evil, they confront their reality, they speak to the surreal, they speak to all that's going on by loving one another. And if that seems like it's impossible, and it is, Jesus then gives them the reality behind it. How is it that they have the capacity to love one another? How is it that we have the capacity to love one another? And it's that first phrase, it's the opening phrase of the commandment. Just as I have loved you. Just circle that in your Bibles. Just as I have loved you. Just as I have loved you sits at the center of the command. It demands our attention. So you feel like you don't have the capacity to love? You don't have a capacity to make sense of COVID-19? And you don't have a sense, you don't have the capacity to make sense of what's going on in life right now? You don't have the capacity to look beyond what's going on in your situation and the walls are closing in? You don't have that capacity for this very surreal moment, the sheltering in place, the stir craziness of it all? Just as I have loved you. Just as I have loved you. You and I are called to come face to face with our moment right now with love. Because Christ has loved us. And he has given us the capacity to love one another. So we have love for each other, love for our neighbor, love for our city, love for our community. Love. The only way we ever pull this off is to look to the one and experience the one who has loved us first. And John actually says this later, writing again to the same faith community later on, a few years later, he says, we love because Jesus first loved us. Just as I have loved you. Jesus goes to the cross and does for us what we cannot do for ourselves. He loves us so that we can love. And he loves us knowing that we don't love like we should. That's why he died. He dies because we don't love each other like we should. But he also dies to give us the capacity and to instill in us a love for each other. He did that so that we can love. So we come to our crisis and we come to our pandemic, and the way we confront it, the way we approach it is love for one another. We don't have to know all there is to know. We don't have to be the experts. We don't have to be the knight on the white horse saving the day. We don't have to spin our wheels going silly trying to figure out exactly how safe we can get. And it's a good thing to be safe. It's a good thing for us to take all those precautions. But if we become obsessed with that, pretty soon, again, we're spiraling. We don't have to know all those things, and we don't have to be the experts. But what we can do is love one another. Just as I have loved you, love one another. That's our apologetic. That's our answer to sickness. That's our answer to disease. That's our answer for all the wrongs we see everybody else making and doing right now. Just as I have loved you, so you also love one another. That's John 13 for this conversation at the table. I pray for you. I'm praying for you every day. I pray that Jesus is close to you and comforts you and is near you in this time. Again, stay safe, stay healthy, stay connected. Reach out to people around you through the internet and through the social media and through the various tools that we have. Stay connected. We are loved by Jesus for the love of Los Fresnos. You have a good afternoon.